Let's take a look at Johnathan Hankins, interior defensive lineman, formerly of the Colts. Tom, this guy ranked 20th among linemen according to Pro Football Focus a year ago, and here we are with him still available.
All these players, for some reason, have a rationale. Doesn't mean it's a good one as to why they're unsigned. If I'm guessing for Hankins, he probably wants a little bit more money than he should get right now, which is very rare for this time of the year because of the teams that left, like the Colts, for example, ironically enough, have a ton of cap space left to spend. As for Hankins himself, I've always wondered, and there's no real rationale behind it, maybe he's not always the easiest guy to manage. Because the Giants didn't really show a ton of interest in paying him what he wanted. The Colts had him for a year, and even though the Colts have maybe the worst defensive line in the NFL based on the way it currently sits, they'll be fine going forward down the road. Like, we were putting together our potential teams list, and I'm like, oh, the Colts, oh, wait. Like, the Colts need more defensive line help, but they're not going to bring back Hankins. So there's something to it with Johnathan Hankins, and he had the one good year in New York where he showed some real pass rushing ability. I think that was kind of a flash in the pan. He's kind of more of a 4-3 defensive tackle run stopper type. But I think there are a lot of teams that still need that. But if teams don't think Hankins can rush the passer, they're not going to pay high money. And I think that's partially a big reason why he remains unsigned.
Well, before we get to the top 5 here, Tom, some honorable mentions on your screen. Seattle, Los Angeles, Arizona, Houston, and Washington. Washington addressed the interior of that line via the draft. Seattle lost Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett as well in that front line. The Chargers struggled.
Richardson as well.
Sheldon Richardson. The Chargers struggled against the run last year, so a lot of feasible options on the board there.
Yeah, a couple reasons why these teams didn't crack our top 5. Seattle, even though they lost Sheldon up front, they did bring in the 2 Vikings guys, Tom Johnson and Shamar Stevens. I don't think they'll add somebody, but I wouldn't hate it.
Frank Clark is there as well.
I think it could be a good idea. Agreed. LA, I'm not the biggest fan of the combo of Brandon Mabane and Corey Luigit, but I think that LA's fine. They drafted Justin Jones out of NC State, so I don't think they're going to go out and get someone like Hankins. Arizona, I still think could use some more depth up front, especially if they do move to a 4-3 scheme under Steve Wilkes, which maybe makes them a bit of a dark horse on this list. Houston is intriguing to me because I like the idea of Hankins in there to help with that defensive line, but they do run a 3-4 scheme, and I don't know how Hankins would fare as a 3-4 defensive end. It's not really a role he's played all that consistently in the NFL. He's had a couple snaps of the 5 technique, but it's not really his ideal fit, so I don't know if it makes a lot of sense. Had the Redskins not drafted Vita in round, or not Vita, Daron Payne, excuse me, in round 1, I think they would have signed Hankins. They brought him in for a visit, but with the addition of Payne, I don't think you'll see the Redskins go in that route and try and add Hankins to their roster.
All right, so cross them off the list, at least for now. Let's get inside the top 5 here. We'll start things off with the Miami Dolphins. You got Devon Godchaux there, Jordan Phillips. They're on the inside. They had decent seasons, Tom, but they cut Ndamukong Suh, and perhaps there's a little bit of a hole there where maybe you can fill it with Johnathan Hankins.
I mean, I think you're trying to give Vinny Taylor more reps. You're trying to get Devin more reps. Jordan Phillips a little bit more reps, assuming he's actually healthy for an extended period of time. But I don't think bringing in Akeem Spence and losing Suh makes you a better football team. And I do wonder in general what the Dolphins' plan is this year. Like,
to lose.
Obviously their plan is to win games, what every team's plan is. But they're definitely worse up front, and I think Hankins would fit well in the Dolphins' scheme. He wouldn't necessarily prevent Devin and Phillips and Vinny Taylor from playing a lot. You could make it into really a 4-man rotation, which in today's day and age in the NFL, that's kind of what you want up front. You want to have all your defensive linemen fresh, and if you want to roll with those 5 as your DTs and you get rid of Gabe Wright, I think that's a pretty good grouping there, Cam. It's not quite the same star power as Suh, but it's a quality group overall.
Miami was middle of the pack last year, Tom, against the run. They were ranked 14th in terms of yards per game, and you lose Ndamukong Suh, you would think by nature that ranking gets worse.
It has to.
And to kind of combat that negativity there, maybe you have to sign somebody like a Johnathan Hankins who probably is starting to see his ego diminish a little bit here, saying to himself, all right, maybe I got to lower the price tag a little bit.
I think it has. So we'll see if that does happen with Hankins. He'll get signed at some point. Maybe it's closer to training camp. Around this point of the year in OTAs and in mandatory minicamp, you tend to see teams trying to wait on veteran guys because they want to see what these younger players have. They want to get these rookies, these undrafted free agents, these second and third year guys. They want to get them as many reps as they can during OTAs just to see what they have and get a little bit better feel for how they're going to be at the position. Yeah, you drafted somebody and you think he's going to be good, but you do just want to wait and see to see how they actually look with your team as opposed to with Oklahoma or with USC, whatever college program that they went to.
Well, we'll see if DC Matt Burke calls up to the front office there and says, hey, how about you go sign Johnathan Hankins? We got the Dolphins there at number 5. Let's go to number 4 here, out to the NFC side of things. The Detroit Lions, new head coach Matt Patricia, good defensive mind. You know, Tom, he once coached a guy named Vince Wilfork, and I'm not saying that Johnathan Hankins is Vince Wilfork, but he's kind of that sort of build there.
I am very curious what the Lions do up front with their scheme, if it's going to be more of a 4-3, a 3-4 hybrid, and of course you're going to see a lot of nickel because that's what the NFL does. The base defenses in today's NFL are basically a nickel defense. So that's a whole different debate, but I'm a big fan of A'Shawn Robinson. They brought in Sylvester Williams, who's just not as good as Johnathan
Inconsistent.
Hankins. He's just not as good. He can be the big guy up front. And I think in general, and this is a good time to bring this up, I'll save it for later. I'll save my point I've got on the general reality of big defensive linemen as nose guards for a different team. We'll get to them later because they just hate this type of player. You know who it is. Some of you fans out there know who it is as well. Deshaun Hand they brought in. He's, I think, going to play some DE or some DT. He can go a little bit of both ways depending on what front the Lions are using. But I think if you, in reality, just get rid of a Ringo or, make Sylvester a backup and then bring in Hankins, you feel a lot better about that defensive line. And Detroit's not a bad team by any means, but I think Hankins helps that defense in a noticeable way.
18th against the run last year. They struggled a little bit in creating sacks. Ziggy Ansah helped a little bit.
And I don't know if Sylvester Williams and I guess Hand really replace what Haloti Ngata can bring to you.
Sure.
Of course, he's not the same player, but he's still, good enough. So,
all right.
I like the fit with Detroit. I just don't know if that's what's going to happen here with Hankins.
So Detroit's at number 4. We've got 3 teams that have better chances here. Let's take a look at number 3, the New Orleans Saints. And they were 16th against the run last year. I like where they're at, Tom, with the edge rushers. I think they're just fine there with Okafor and Jordan and Davenport, whom they gave up the world for, but that's another discussion. The interior, though, perhaps could be filled by Hankins.
I don't hate where the Saints are at, and of the teams we're discussing in this media group, I think the Saints have the best defensive line, both on the interior and on the edge overall. I'm a big fan of Sheldon Rankins. He is a very good 3 technique, but the Saints' plan was to have Nick Fairley next to Rankins. Of course, that's no longer in the cards because of Fairley's heart conditions. They brought in Jay Bromley to play a very similar role, and that's why the Saints aren't any higher on this list, because Bromley can kind of play that big no-stuffer role there. Tyler Davison was a lot better this year for the Saints. I know, Cam, I know that's something that you had mentioned to us before the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Took a nice step forward in his 3rd year. 81 grade, according to Pro Football Focus. Had back-to-back poor grades in his first couple of years. Bounced back nicely in that 3rd year. And Tom, I guess the argument with the Saints is that, well, you look at the secondary, and it's fantastic. Ken Crawley, Marshawn Lattimore, the list goes on. Absolutely.
Marcus Williams and so on, yeah.
And so maybe the emphasis for them isn't so much on that defensive front because they know they can utilize that secondary.
Probably not, and they have Cam Jordan. They drafted Marcus Davenport, and they're in good shape overall. They can get by with this group. But I think some of the moves they made, they brought in Patrick Robinson. They went on, they signed Mario Davis. At positions where other players overachieved last year, the Saints did I thought, a fantastic job of eliminating some of the possibility of regression because players like a Ken Crawley were big surprises in case they took a step back.
Patrick Robinson there, too.
Had a regression year. They didn't really do it at defensive tackle. Bringing in Hankins, even for a 1-year deal, would be another one of those short-term win-now moves that the Saints are trying to make while they have Drew Brees under contract
and that
still
narrative
playing at a high level.
That narrative makes a lot of sense, too, because the Saints made a major Super Bowl move, right, when they went up and drafted Marcus Davenport.
Yes, they did.
I mean, that tells me that, all right, we're going all in for this final Super Bowl window that we have, talking about the New Orleans Saints here with Drew Brees, and who knows when he will start to decline and so on. So we got the Saints there at number 3. Let's take a look at the number 2 team that could sign Johnathan Hankins here. And we've got the Dallas Cowboys. And Tom, I'll give you the floor on this one because I know you have a little bit of a rant to say about the Dallas Cowboys and one techniques out there. It's failed to sign Terrell McClain.
This team should be #1 on the list. They absolutely should be. But the Cowboys simply don't value the one technique position, and I actually very much disagree with their stance against it. The Cowboys view the one technique spot as, I'll be very blunt here, they just need a fat guy that can give them 15 snaps a game. That's all they think they need out of the one technique spot. Maybe it's 20 snaps, 25, whatever depending on the flow of the game. I actually very much disagree with that mindset because I've seen it time and time again. On first and second down, you're allowing teams to run against you because you've got a replacement level player in that one technique role who's getting beat a lot. And it's allowing the halfbacks to cut open and get big gains.
Yep.
And you're not allowing your linebackers, your talented linebackers, to get free space to roam. Instead, you're asking them to help even shed blockers at time. You're asking them to do too much. So the Cowboys don't value the one technique spot, but they should absolutely sign Johnathan Hankins. I mean, look at this depth chart right here. David Irving, who is a 3 technique. Malik Collins, who right now has a broken foot and might not be back till training camp. A 3 technique by trade, playing out of position as a 1 technique, and it shows on the film and on the field because he gets beat a lot in that nose guard role. Jihad Ward, who the Raiders didn't want, they traded him for Ryan Switzer. He's kind of more of a David Irving technique. Brian Price is the definition of a replacement level nose guard. The Packers didn't want him. Cowboys picked him up, and he was okay when he was on the field. But he's not going to be an impact guy. Richard Ash might make the roster. Antoine Woods got cut by the Titans with an injury settlement. The Cowboys picked him up. It's a bad unit at defensive tackle. And I know you have to go cheap in certain areas, but the Cowboys have the money. If they really want to upgrade their run defense, which wasn't all that great last year, and it's a little bit better because they control the clock so much more. It looks a little bit inflated compared to everything else. Go sign Hankins. Bring him in. You wanted Terrell McClain. The Cowboys, for some silly reason, only want one techniques who offer 3 technique abilities, a.k.a. they can rush the passer, which is great. You would love to have one of those guys. That's why Vita Vea and Daron Payne went early because they can do both. But you're undervaluing what a guy like Hankins or anyone else brings, even a guy like Tim Settle from the draft or Terrell McClain. They bring you good run stopping. Look how well that's worked for teams that have had Damon Harrison over the past few years.
Sure.
It's a valuable role that I think more and more in today's pass-happy NFL is being very undervalued.
Brandon Williams with the Ravens as well.
Great example, too.
All right, there you go. We got the Dallas Cowboys at #2. Just to put a bow on them, Tom, you talked about the one technique situation in Dallas. Is this a Dallas Cowboys problem or a Rod Marinelli problem?
It's both. Rod Marinelli is making the decisions for this in this area, but it is a Rod Marinelli viewpoint that he just doesn't value the one technique. So he says, one technique, no, give me another guy that can blitz.
All right. Cowboys
and
at 2.
Lawrence Armstrong being taken.
Let's go to #1 on the list. We've got the Cleveland Browns, and a team that is shaking up pretty good overall in terms of the front 7. They're bringing in Michael Kendricks. By the way, bizarre story to say the least, how that all went down.
I'm not signing. Yes,
not signing, but he ended up signing kind of deal. And overall, like I mentioned, good front 7. I like Jamie Collins a lot. Joe Schobert, the 4th-round pick in 2016. Then you look at the defensive line, the edge rushers, headlined by Myles Garrett. But you look at the interior, maybe they could use Johnathan Hankins.
And look, they're not looking for Hankins to play every snap for them. And I think you'll see quite a bit, especially on some third downs. You'll see a defensive end, be it a Myles Garrett, be it a Chris Smith or even a Carl Nassib, and we've seen Chris Smith have success in this role with the Bengals, kicking inside and rushing from the interior. But they traded away Danny Shelton because they didn't want him anymore. But Shelton, even though he did not live up to the pick that the Browns spent on him, they still need that type of one technique run stopper at defensive tackle, and I think Hankins is the absolute perfect fit for that role. You run out there, Cam, on first and second down with Johnathan Hankins, Larry Ojeanobi, Myles Garrett, and Emmanuel Ogbah, that's one hell of a front 4 for any team, especially the Browns.
Plus Carl Nassib.
You can bring Nassib. You got some depth there as well with guys like Caleb Brantley and even Coley. There's some talent on that front unit. Bringing in Hankins is just icing on the cake for a Browns team that, young talent-wise, is not going to be as bad as they were last year. And they shouldn't be. They're building in the right direction, of course. There's a lot more other things that go into it than just having
It has to get better for the Browns.
the coaching staff.
Law of averages says so. All right, where should Johnathan Hankins sign? Let us know in the reaction poll. Give us a heart for the Browns, a like for the Dallas Cowboys, laughing face for those Saints, a wow face for another team out there.